6:10 hours, Norwegian Sea. A cold gray dawn spread across the waters of the Norwegian Sea. NATO surveillance aircraft were already patrolling the region as part of routine monitoring operations. Tensions between Western forces and Russia had been slowly rising for weeks, and military activity across the North Atlantic had increased noticeably. Radar operators aboard a patrol aircraft suddenly noticed a new signal appearing on their tracking systems. At first, it looked like a standard naval contact, but within seconds, identification systems updated. This was not an ordinary ship. It was one of the most heavily armed vessels in the Russian Navy. 6:16 hours. Identification confirmed. Satellite images and maritime tracking systems quickly confirmed the vessel's identity. It was the massive Admiral Nakhimov, a nuclear-powered battlecruiser known for carrying one of the most powerful missile arsenals at sea. Military analysts immediately understood why this ship mattered. The vessel was designed to launch advanced cruise missiles capable of striking targets hundreds of miles away. When ships like this left port, NATO forces always paid close attention. 6:22 hours, course toward NATO waters. Tracking data showed the warship moving steadily westward through the Norwegian Sea. Its projected course would bring it closer to waters frequently used by NATO naval patrols. Inside monitoring centers belonging to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, analysts began reviewing the situation carefully. The movement could be routine. Russian warships regularly conducted long-range patrols, but the timing of this deployment raised questions. 6:35 hours. NATO surveillance expands. Additional reconnaissance aircraft were launched to monitor the ship's movement. Naval intelligence teams analyzed satellite images and electronic signals coming from the vessel. The goal was simple: understand what the warship was doing and whether it represented a potential threat to nearby forces. Despite the tension, military planners avoided jumping to conclusions. Naval encounters in international waters occur frequently, and professional monitoring is designed to prevent misinterpretation. 6:50 hours, NATO warships move. Several NATO vessels operating in the region adjusted their patrol routes. These ships were part of multinational naval groups conducting exercises across the North Atlantic. Their commanders were instructed to maintain awareness of the Russian warship's position while continuing routine operations. At the same time, communication channels between naval commands remained active to reduce the risk of misunderstanding. 7:05 hours. Strategic attention news of the warship's movement quickly reached defense officials in several capitals. The presence of such a powerful vessel near key NATO patrol routes attracted immediate strategic interest. Ships like the Admiral Nakhimov carry long-range missiles capable of targeting ships, aircraft, and land installations. While its patrol might simply represent a show of naval presence, planners could not ignore the possibility of increased military signaling. 7:18 hours. Aircraft launch. From a nearby NATO airbase, maritime patrol aircraft took off to provide additional surveillance. Flying high above the clouds, these aircraft carried sophisticated radar systems capable of tracking ships across vast distances. Within minutes, the Russian warship appeared clearly on their monitoring screens. It continued moving westward at a steady speed. Its escort vessels followed several miles behind. 7:30 hours. The situation intensifies. As the morning progressed, analysts began noticing something unusual. Electronic signals detected from the Russian ship suggested that some of its radar systems had become more active. This didn't necessarily mean hostile intent, but it indicated the crew had moved to a higher level of operational awareness. Across NATO monitoring centers, attention sharpened, because when powerful warships activate advanced systems, it usually means something important is unfolding. 7:42 hours. A second contact. Then another development appeared on radar screens. A new vessel had entered the area from the east. It was smaller than the battlecruiser, but moving quickly. Analysts began identifying the ship's profile. Within moments, they realized it was another Russian naval unit moving to join the formation. The presence of additional ships raised new questions. Was this simply a routine patrol group or the beginning of a larger naval maneuver? 7:55 hours. Strategic decisions. Ahead, commanders across the region now faced a delicate situation. They needed to continue monitoring the Russian naval group while avoiding actions that might escalate tensions. Orders were issued to maintain professional distance and avoid provocative maneuvers, but everyone involved understood the importance of what they were witnessing. A powerful Russian warship was moving closer to areas regularly patrolled by NATO forces, and the next few hours would determine whether this was simply another day of naval shadowing or the start of something far more serious. 8:47 hours. NATO radar screens light up inside the command center of the NATO maritime headquarters. The atmosphere changed in seconds. A radar operator leaned forward, staring at a cluster of signals appearing across the digital map of the North Atlantic. What he saw made his heart race. Multiple Russian naval vessels were maneuvering in tight formation around the flagship warship that had triggered this entire crisis. At the center of that formation was the massive Admiral Nakhimov, one of the most heavily armed surface combatants ever built. Recently modernized, the ship carried a terrifying arsenal. Among them were the hypersonic 3 M22 Zircon, capable of traveling at speeds above Mach 8. At those speeds, traditional missile defenses had only seconds to react, and now the ship was moving closer to NATO-controlled waters. Within minutes, the command center sent a high-priority alert to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization naval forces operating in the region. 9:03 hours. The U.S. carrier group moves into position. Nearly 400 kilometers away, the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford was cutting through the cold Atlantic waves. It was the most advanced aircraft carrier ever built by the United States Navy. Its radar systems and battle management networks were designed specifically for modern threats like hypersonic missiles. The carrier was not alone. It was surrounded by a powerful carrier strike group. 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyer warships formed the outer defensive ring. A Ticonderoga-class cruiser served as the fleet's air defense commander. Together, they carried hundreds of interceptor missiles. But even with this massive firepower, one threat remained terrifying: hypersonic weapons. Because at Mach 8, distance disappears quickly. 9:15 hours, Russian fleet begins aggressive maneuvers. Satellite imagery confirmed what NATO commanders feared. The Russian task force had begun combat positioning. The Admiral Nakhimov turned directly toward NATO patrol zones. Destroyers flanked its sides. Submarines were suspected beneath the surface. Russian aircraft also began flying overhead patrol patterns. At that moment, analysts realized something chilling. This was no simple patrol. It was a show of force, a dangerous one. The situation was escalating faster than anyone expected. 9:26 hours. Electronic warfare begins. Suddenly, radar interference flooded NATO detection systems. Signals became distorted. Communications experienced momentary disruption. Electronic warfare had begun. Russian ships were attempting to blind surveillance systems and confuse targeting radars. Electronic warfare specialists aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford quickly activated countermeasures. Advanced signal filters restored partial radar clarity, but the interference was a clear message. Russia was preparing the battlefield. 0940 hours, the first missile lock. Inside the Combat Information Center of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, alarms began flashing. Targeting radar detected missile launch signatures from the direction of the Russian fleet. At first, operators weren't sure if the signals were real or decoys. Then the confirmation arrived. Thermal satellites detected the launch plume. 1, 2, 3 missile launches, all coming from the direction of the Admiral Nakhimov. The missiles were accelerating at terrifying speed. They were the hypersonic 3 M22 Zircon. 9:41 hours, the race against time. When a hypersonic missile launches, the timeline for survival shrinks dramatically. Traditional anti-ship missiles might take minutes to arrive, but hypersonic weapons, sometimes less than 2 minutes. The United States Navy combat system switched instantly to automatic defensive mode. Aegis radar locked onto the incoming objects. Speed calculation appeared on screen. Mach 8. Altitude fluctuating. Trajectory unpredictable. These missiles were maneuvering. That made interception even harder. 0942 hours, America's first line of defense. The destroyer commander shouted a single word: engage. Vertical launch cells opened across the deck. Interceptor missiles blasted into the sky. Among them were the advanced SM-6 interceptors. Designed for high-speed threats, they raced upward to meet the incoming hypersonic weapons. The sky filled with contrails. Each interceptor attempted to calculate the unpredictable path of the Zircon missiles. The first interception attempt began. 0943 hours. The first explosion. A flash appeared on radar. Then another. One interceptor connected. A Zircon missile exploded in the upper atmosphere. Fragments scattered across the ocean. Cheers erupted briefly inside the combat center, but but the celebration ended quickly. 2 missiles were still incoming, and they were closing fast. 0944 hours. Last defensive layer. The surviving missiles began descending toward the carrier strike group. At this stage, the final defense systems activated. The phalanx CIWS guns aboard multiple ships spun to life. These close-in weapon systems fire thousands of rounds per minute. Their job is simple: destroy anything that gets too close. Radar tracked the incoming targets. Every second mattered now. 0945 hours. Chaos on the ocean. The second missile was intercepted just seconds before reaching the fleet. A direct hit from an SM-6 interceptor shattered it mid-air, but the third missile kept coming. It had changed trajectory multiple times. Electronic decoys and jamming made targeting extremely difficult. The missile was now only kilometers away. CIWS guns opened fire. Streams of tracer rounds filled the air. 0945 18 hours. The final interception. At the last possible moment, the hypersonic missile exploded. Debris splashed into the ocean less than 2 kilometers from the carrier. Shockwaves rolled across the water, but the carrier strike group was safe. For now. 0950 hours. America's countermove. Moments after the attack failed, U.S. commanders made a decision. The fleet would not simply retreat, they would respond. Fighter jets launched from the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford. Among them were stealth strike fighters. The powerful F-35C Lightning II roared into the sky. Their mission was clear: neutralize the threat. 10:02 hours. Stealth jets. Enter the fight. Flying low across the ocean, the F-35C fighters used stealth technology to avoid Russian radar detection. They carried long-range anti-ship missiles designed specifically for targets like the Admiral Nakhimov. Data from NATO satellites guided them toward the Russian fleet. The pilots knew one thing: they were approaching one of the most heavily defended ships in the world. 10:11 hours. Russian air defenses activate. As the fighters approached launch range, Russian radar systems suddenly detected them. Air defense systems aboard the Russian warships activated. Missiles were prepared. Electronic countermeasures flooded the airwaves. The battle was escalating into something far bigger. 10:15 hours. America unleashes hell. At exactly 10:15 GMT, the U.S. fighters launched their weapons. Multiple long-range anti-ship missiles streaked toward the Russian fleet. The ocean battlefield had reached its most dangerous moment. Now the question was simple: would the Russian warships survive the counterattack, or would one of the most powerful warships ever built be destroyed in the middle of the Atlantic? 10:17 hours. A naval battle the world never saw. What happened next would remain classified for years, but one thing was certain: the confrontation between Russia and NATO had come closer to open war than anyone realized. Satellites recorded explosions, ships maneuvered violently, electronic warfare blinded sensors, and for several terrifying minutes, the North Atlantic became the center of the most dangerous naval standoff of the century. The aftermath. Hours later, the fleets separated. Diplomatic channels exploded with urgent communication. Governments attempted to calm the situation before it spiraled into something irreversible. But military analysts around the world reached the same conclusion: modern naval warfare had entered a new era. Hypersonic missiles, stealth aircraft, and electronic warfare had transformed the battlefield, and the next confrontation might not end without casualties.